You want to buy a football club, not a small one, a real one, the kind that plays on TV every week in front of hundreds of millions of people. You think the price tag is the hard part, and you think once you pay it, you own a business that prints money, the way a big global brand should. Here's the number that breaks that idea. Some of the most famous clubs in the world, full stadiums, huge fan bases, front page news every week, lose enormous amounts of money in a single season, not once, again and again, year after year. Money isn't the barrier to owning a club. Losing money is almost part of the deal. So the real question isn't why clubs lose money. It's why the world's richest people still pay record prices to own that loss. To understand that, you have to look closely at both sides of the ledger, how the money actually comes in and how it actually goes out. Let's start with how a club earns. The first source is matchday income: tickets, food and drink, parking, merchandise sold at the ground. This feels like the obvious source, but it's usually the smallest one, and there's a simple reason why. A stadium has a fixed number of seats. A season has a fixed number of home games. No matter how popular a club becomes, it cannot sell more seats than the stadium physically holds, and it cannot add extra home games to squeeze out more revenue. This income is capped by concrete and steel, not by demand. The second source, and a much bigger one, is broadcast revenue. This exists for a specific reason. A live match is one of the last things people still watch in real time, without skipping ahead or waiting until later. Nearly everything else on television now gets watched whenever the viewer wants, on their own schedule. Football doesn't work that way. You watch it as it happens, or the moment is gone. That makes it extremely valuable to advertisers, because guaranteed, undistracted, real-time attention has become rare. Broadcasters pay huge sums for the right to show these matches, and that money gets split between clubs, partly as a shared pool, so every club in the league gets a baseline amount, and partly based on how often a club's matches get selected for television, which usually depends on how big and popular that club already is. So a club earns more broadcast money not just by winning, but by being watched. The third source is commercial income: shirt sponsors, stadium naming rights, kit manufacturer deals, and partnerships with other brands. This is the category most closely tied to global size rather than results. A sponsor isn't really paying to be associated with a trophy. They're paying to be seen by the audience that follows the club. An audience that might be spread across dozens of countries, buying shirts and watching highlights in places the club has never actually played a match. The bigger and more recognizable the club's name, the more valuable this becomes, almost regardless of where the club finishes in the league that year. Now here's the side that explains why all of that income still isn't enough. The single biggest cost is player wages, and it behaves nothing like a normal business expense. In most industries, if a company underperforms, costs can be trimmed. Football doesn't work that way. A contract signed during a strong season still has to be paid in full during a weak one. Players sign long-term deals, often for several years, and the club is locked into paying that wage regardless of injuries, loss of form, or a poor league finish. This means wage costs tend to only move in one direction, upward, as clubs compete with each other to attract and keep top players, each one trying to outbid the others for the same small pool of elite talent. Then there are transfer fees, and these work in a way that surprises a lot of people. A club doesn't record the full cost of a transfer in the year it happens. Instead, the fee gets spread out, or amortized, across the length of the player's contract. So if a club pays a large fee for a player on a 5-year deal, only a portion of that cost appears on the books each year for 5 years. This means a club can spend enormous amounts today while the financial impact only shows up gradually. And if that player is sold early, injured long-term, or simply doesn't work out, the remaining unpaid portion of that cost still has to be accounted for all at once, creating a sudden loss that has nothing to do with that season's performance. On top of wages and transfers, there are agent fees, which can be substantial for high-profile deals. There's the cost of running an academy and a youth system, which requires coaches, facilities, and years of investment, often without any guarantee that a single player to come through it. There's stadium debt, since building or upgrading a modern stadium can cost an enormous amount, and that debt has to be serviced with interest payments every year regardless of how the team performs. And there's the general cost of running a large organization: staff, travel, medical teams, scouting networks, all of which scale up as a club tries to compete at the highest level. Because wages and transfer costs keep climbing on their own, financial rules now exist specifically to stop clubs from spending far beyond what they earn. In simple terms, a club is only allowed to lose a certain amount of money over a rolling multi-year period. Go beyond that limit, And the punishment isn't just financial. It can cost the club points in the league table, which is something most other major sports businesses around the world don't risk at all. That single detail changes everything about how football clubs are forced to behave financially, because it means overspending doesn't just hurt the balance sheet. It can directly damage the thing the whole business depends on, staying in the competition that generates the broadcast money in the first place. And that creates a loop that makes football uniquely fragile compared to almost any other kind of business. A club spends heavily to compete, hoping the results justify the cost. If results fall short, the club risks financial penalties or, in the worst case, relegation to a lower division. Drop down a division, and broadcast income can fall dramatically overnight. While the wages and contracts signed for the top level don't shrink at anywhere near the same speed, the costs stay high, the income collapses. And because so much of a club's spending is locked in years in advance through contracts, there's often no quick way to fix the gap. So put both sides next to each other. A club earns from broadcast deals that reward visibility and reach as much as results, and from sponsorship deals that reward global size more than league position. It loses through wages that never move downward, transfer costs that show up years after the actual decision was made, debt that has to be serviced no matter what happens on the pitch, and the constant financial pressure of trying to stay competitive in a market where every rival is spending just as aggressively. None of these forces cancel each other out neatly. They exist at the same time, pulling in opposite directions, which is exactly why a football club can be one of the most valuable businesses in the world and one of the least profitable ones in the very same year. That's the part the trophy case never tells you. A football club isn't really run to make a yearly profit. It's run to hold on to something rare, thus a guaranteed global audience's attention, even when the cost of holding on to it barely leaves anything behind.